Hello everyone and welcome to ZP Productions. I'm Richard, and one of the more common things I'm being asked today is the A1 significantly better than the A7 IV? Which camera should I buy? Should I buy the Z6 II or the Z9? What's the difference between them? As a reviewer, these kind of questions are pretty common. People tend to ask them, and today's video is really answering those questions. Now, first we have to understand what's the difference between a high-end camera and a more affordable one. And more often than not, the differences are not as drastic as you think. But by and large, to summarize it, a high-end camera will give you a better chance to get the shot you want. It won't make you a better photographer, it won't give you a better shot, but the chances are better there. And let me explain to you in this video here. So, what is the purpose of a camera? It is to take the photo and help you to get it and produce you that file, which is either a RAW or JPEG. So, usually you can split it up into two parts, the act of taking the photo and the photo itself, which is image quality. Now, let me answer the image quality section first. Image quality is, by and large, very simple still. The bigger sensor will have a nicer image quality. And that's because of physics, because you just have more areas on your sensor itself. Megapixels today are still determined by the size of the sensor. The highest megapixel today is by Phase 1 IQ4, the biggest sensor. And if you look at APS-C, the maximum megapixel there is lower. But megapixels is not everything. There is also dynamic range. How much information can be stored on the sensor to produce you the best shadow or best highlights. And that is still also roughly determined by your sensor size. If you look at photons to photo, look at the chart here. IQ4 is at the top, followed by the GFX100, then the A7R4s, and then the APS-C cameras. So what can I summarize is that image quality is largely due to the size of the sensor. So if you are trying to ask yourself, is the A7 IV better image or the A1 is a better image, I would say as they are about the same. Now, of course, you tend to pay more money if there's more megapixels because it's just harder to build pixels on that small little sensor itself. But if you are posting in Facebook with 2 megapixels, it doesn't matter. If you don't print, it probably don't matter to you too. If you don't crop, it probably don't matter to you too. And the moment light goes down, where you have less light or you shoot in available light like nighttime, your pixels tend to be a bit noisier because your pixels are smaller. Bigger pixels tend to capture more light, a smaller pixel tend to capture less light per pixel, and then you have to size down and what's not. So a higher megapixel is only better in the most optimal condition, while once you leave the optimal condition, between the high and low megapixels, they are about the same. Especially once you leave like 3200. To me, high megapixel camera above 3200 tend to be quite unusable unless you size down because the noise will be very noisy. I wouldn't dare to crop much, even with 64 megapixels or 62 of them. But that said, noise quality, as I said, also is due to the size of the pixel. So as such, a bigger sensor tend to have better noise quality. Now, there is one thing in modern sensors today that we tend to talk about, and that is rolling shutter. Rolling shutter is some distortion here. Let me show you the clip here. It is really distortion because you pan the camera too fast or the subject is too quick and then you read out. This affects a lot if you're using electronic shutter or doing video. But if you're using mechanical shutter, it doesn't matter. I can just tell you that. And that's because the mechanical shutter will control it and let your camera capture whatever you want and dump it out, rather than try to read the sensor out as you are taking the shot. So modern cameras like the R3, A1 and Z9s have very good rolling shutter control. And if you are the type that want to use electronic shutter and you are the type that can only shoot in locations that cannot make any sound, then buying a high-end camera will be beneficial for you. Now, rolling shutter is one thing, but really what's the point of rolling shutter? It's really all about usability in locations that you cannot shoot. So let's look at the whole part of taking photos itself. When you actually want to take photos, there are quite a few steps you need to do. It's just that we usually tend to subconsciously do it. Firstly, taking a photo, first you have to bring the camera out. And bringing the camera out is, of course, based on your purpose, the conditions, and most importantly, the environment. You may be going in very hostile environment like rain, snow, sandstorms, and high-end camera tend to just survive better. Like between the R3 and R5, I think there's no fight. The R3 will probably survive a sandstorm or a snow or rain better than the R5. That's pretty much it. So this is in fact the first thing that most manufacturers will cheapen out. And that's because there is cost to it. And if I want to make a camera cheaper, the first thing is reduce the quality of the body itself. After talking about, bringing the camera out, you need to adjust the camera to how you like it before you start shooting and during when you are shooting itself. And that is determined by how comprehensive the menu is, and of course how customizable the camera is. And you can see that no matter what, the R3 has more buttons than the R5. And the price difference is very small here, but the R3 still has more. Same, the A1 does have more functions than the A7R4. They have the extra dial at the side. Usually, better cameras tend to have more customizability in the menu. They tend to have more memory banks. They tend to have more functionalities. And they also tend to have the ability to map most of the major controls onto buttons. As such, you can almost say that usability-wise, in the field, in extreme scenarios where you need to quickly set your settings up, high-end cameras tend to be a little quicker. And that may matter if you are doing sports and action. After that, after doing all this, you need to bring the camera up to your face, look to the viewfinder or the EVF behind, and do the framing to prepare your shot capture. And this whole thing, I would say, as EVF and LCD today, high-end cameras tend to be a little bit better. But if the price gap is not too huge, like between the R5 and the R3, the difference is very minor. What's different, however, is the latency, which is the time where the sensor sees the image and the time it appears on your back LCD or EVF. The high-end cameras tend to be a little bit quicker, and that's because of the stack sensor technology today they have inside. Compared to the R5, this is slightly faster, about 20-30 milliseconds faster. Does it matter to you? You go and look at what's millisecond. It's very small. Maybe it doesn't matter to you at all. This is only very critical to people who need the timing and the speed, but if you are not in that category, you probably don't care. After that, we'll look at autofocus. And autofocus-wise, well, I think everybody knows the better camera do autofocus better. That's because they have better processors, better sensors, more autofocus points. And this has been there since day one. I don't think I need to go very deep into it, but just know that the R3 definitely does autofocus better than the EOS R. But between the R5 and R3, because they are very close in terms of price bracket, the performance is very similar. And also, I want to say is that don't expect your A7 IV, which is a newer camera, to autofocus as fast as your A1. It won't happen because the A1 has a better sensor readout. It's reading out so fast that it can do all the minor calculations to get the very sharpest point. The A7 IV can't do it. So yes, they use the same algorithm, the same logic, but the better camera do AF better. After AF, what do you have left, right? You may be wondering. And that is bursting. How fast can you shoot? How many FPS and how long can you sustain the FPS? The R5 can shoot, 20 frames a second, but it can shoot like 3 to 4 seconds. The R3 can shoot 30 frames per second. But yes, it's 24 megapixels, but it shoots 30 frames per second, and it can shoot for a good period of 6 seconds, 6 plus to 7 seconds. Does it matter to you? Do you need to choose the best shot in that collection? Maybe. If you're doing action or doing things like baseball, basketball, the nicest shot is probably when the ball hits the bat, or the nicest shot is when the guy leaps up and touch the ring. These are things that you will need faster frames to give you a better chance to get the shot you want. Choosing a shot out of 190 sure is definitely better than choosing a shot out of 60 here. So, in the end of the day, really, what does it matter to you? As I said at the start, a better camera gives you a better chance, and that's because it has better AF, it has more bursts, it can burst faster, it has a body that you can bring out in any conditions and capturing in most adverse states, and most importantly, you can set up your settings very quickly. The last thing you want is the camera to slow you down. So a better camera don't make you a better photographer, but a better camera will definitely give you a better chance. Image quality wise, about the same, as long as they are full frame in the same generation, unless you are printing very, 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 very big. You really can't tell a difference between all the sensors. In fact, for the full frame cameras, a high-end camera like the R3 won't produce a better shot than the R5. In fact, the R5 do produce slightly better shots. So same thing for the A7R4 versus the A1. The A7R4 do produce a slightly better shot. What it just means is that the A1 gives you a better chance to capture the shot than the A7R4, and maybe that's all it matters to you at times. So to summarize, if you have the money, buy the best camera because it gives you a better chance. But if not, buy any camera within the same sensor size and it will probably get you there in the same way. And that's why for today. I hope you enjoy this short little explanation on what's different between the high-end camera and the entry one, and should you buy it. If you ask me, I would say yes, use the money, whatever you have. And most importantly, what's your priority? That's why I hope you enjoy this, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.